Hey, you. Um, it's just 6 a.m. and 26th of April. You can probably see that on my screen. I have pulled up some flat Earth maps here. Um, Not looking to tread on anyone's toes, but I'm just rethinking things. Okay. When it comes to this, obviously, we all know these images by now. Uh, And I mean, this is one that we sort of all probably looked at fairly early on and went, "Ooh, look at that!" You know, they were working from this map back in the war, and we can navigate on this map and a whole bunch of stuff, right? I've been chewing over this for quite some time, and I woke up at 3 this morning. Like shit, I need to do more about this because if you think about it, if you're someone who accepts that the Bible has been misappropriated, or may even be a complete work of fiction, or that the Quran or all of these other books and teachings have been misappropriated, or maybe works of fiction, then the ability to create a fictional conception of Earth and the maps and all the maps that we see, even the fantastic old maps from purporting to be from the 1500s and 1600s, those could all be a psyop. Okay, so let's be brave enough and willing to kind of look at things anew. Now, I want to share a few things with you while I can. I'm just gonna fire this at you guys, and I could have spent lost time trying to make something perfect, but I want to share some things with you. Right. Oops. I was born up here in England. This is a stick my son collected the other day. But I was raised here in South Africa on the east coast, but spent my last year or two in South Africa in Cape Town, down here. I had the good fortune, strangely, to go on an icebreaker ship. It's the South African icebreaker ship that is responsible for. Hi there. Hey, Puri. I think you're the first person here, so hello. I just I'm very slack. I don't like keeping people waiting, so I know people may join this a little later on, and we'll need to kind of go back to the beginning to kind of follow what I'm saying. And I'm holding my phone with my hand, so sorry for the shaky nature of this. You know me; it's all pretty rough and ready here. Um, but just a little time before I woke up, I knew about 9/11, but I didn't know much more than that. Um, After I'd published my book, I met a sailor who was doing a presentation on this South African icebreaker ship that's responsible for going down to the Antarctic, and maintaining the station down there. And it's a supply ship, I suppose. Um, it is called the S.A. Agulhas, South African ship Agulhas, and it had just been replaced with the S.A. Agulhas 2, and so it was being used for things other than strictly the sort of military operation that this is. And it had been sailed up to England and had tied up on the River Thames, against a military ship called the HMS Belfast, which is permanently based in the Thames. And it was there for about a week while it collected the crew and the equipment for a very well-known British explorer by the name of Ranulph Fiennes. Now, Ranulph Fiennes is well known by the establishment, and he'd been wanting to do a cross Antarctic trip. I think it was called the longest winter or the longest night or something like that, and he was trying to do an Antarctic crossing through the winter or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly. What's pertinent about this, though, is that the ship had been brought up here, and I had got this unique opportunity to go on board because I was doing a little bit of freelance journalism for a South African newspaper, unpaid work, but they'd been invited, the South African newspaper had been invited to attend a formal function on board where a South African Minister of Transport or whatever had been invited to come and meet these people and so on and so forth. So I took up the opportunity and went aboard and got to talk to some of the people organizing this trip. Now, this again was before I knew about the flat Earth theory, or rather, this was before I knew that the globe was impossible. So I was pretty ignorant at the time. Perhaps I should say nescient. I didn't know that there was a problem with the ball at that time. So I wasn't looking for clues. I wasn't looking for information that could have made this far more interesting. However, what I did learn, which you will find fascinating, is that this guy Ranulph Fiennes, famous as he is, had taken 5 years to get the permission slips for them to carry out this expedition. And so for those guys who were, who loved their masters and loved this system, the Stockholm Syndrome fellas, who keep saying, "Oh, why don't you go down to the wall, and why don't you go to Antarctica and explore and all this sort of stuff?" It had taken Britain's most famous explorer, who was known by the Queen, or is known by the Queen, and all that sort of hoo-ha. It had taken him 5 years to get permission to go. I mean, this is according to the people who were doing all the logistics. Okay. Just an aside is that they loaded up the ship and it went down, and Ranulph Fiennes got on the ship. He only climbed on board in Cape Town. I was invited to a party down there, but I wasn't able to travel. They had a little party, and then off they went. The story goes that he had an injury at some point. He got a bit of frostbite, and the whole thing was called off. So he never actually achieved that thing. And I mean, there's so many stories about explorers never really achieving what they've set out to achieve. And of course, I'm one of those who would say, if he was to have landed here and then traveled, he would have more than likely, the journey was like to come across the shelf like this and then come out here. Now, I can't remember the exact details, and I haven't gone to look into it. You're welcome to if you want to pick holes in the story, by all means. So that's the first thing to mention, to travel down here and to go on some kind of expedition is extremely challenging, and you do need to get permission. And no matter how well established you are, I mean, if you think about it, that they were able to get this South African ship to come all the way up here, collect all of their gear, and it was a lot of gear, and crew, and then sail them all down, and then go on and do all of this. I mean, that takes an awful lot of access. You know, the likes of you and I are never going to get that kind of permission. So that's just a kind of entree into this conversation. Now, I grew up, as I said, on the East Coast, but loved living in Cape Town. I lived there for a couple of years, 93, 94, that period. And I visited what's known as Cape Point, which is allegedly the most southerly point of Africa. And on one particular occasion, I stood on Cape Point and was absolutely gobsmacked that I could see a very distinct line between the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. That was an amazing spectacle for me. I mean, I've talked about it many times, over the years, and whenever I tell people to go down to Cape Town, go to Cape Point, and perhaps if you're lucky, you'll see, if the conditions are right, you'll be able to see very clearly that the two different bodies of water sitting side by side, an almost perfectly straight line coming down like this between these two bodies of water. Having grown up here on the East Coast, we're all very proud in Durban of how warm our seawater is. They say because there's warm currents that come down the coast here, all coming out of Africa, that the seawater is actually so warm that it keeps Durban, where I'm from, it keeps Durban warm in the winter, because the average sea temperature is about 21 degrees Celsius. What's that? 70 Fahrenheit. That's in the winter. Whereas when I lived in Cape Town, I was it's frigid water. It's very, very cold, very unpleasant to swim in the winter, and in the summer, even in the summertime, you don't spend lots of time in the water. In Durban, you could spend all day during the summer. You could stay in the water all day. You could have your lunch there. It's so pleasant in the water. You spend all day. This water here is brackish, slow. The visibility is poor. It's full of nutrients, apparently, this water, and so you get vast shoals of fish coming ashore. They have a sardine run once a year, which is very famous down this coast. And the explanation is that, yes, all of this is picking up nutrients that are being washed from rivers and whatnot, and the heat of so on. And the explanation on this side, I can't really remember, but I want to keep this succinct at this point and say that what I'm trying to draw your attention to is that the water is visibly and obviously and admittedly flowing downwards here, and it's obviously and admittedly flowing upward here. This water is warm and brown and murky. This water is cold, crisp, clean water. So I'm going to offer to you this as a shortcut to my thinking, that water is being drawn down this way for replenishment, recycling, and recycled clean water is coming back up this way. Now, if you're from a different part of the world and you've noted a similar effect, I'd be very grateful if you could elucidate me upon that. I haven't had the pleasure of getting over to Australia, and I unfortunately have never been here in South America. So I can't speak to that. But I want to suggest to you firstly that there is only one ocean, okay? And if you break down the word ocean, then there is a sea over the land. So, I know we spell ocean with a C, the letter C, but actually we know with the way they fiddle with language that ocean would be like one sea. There is one ocean, one connected body of water, and all of these land masses are basically sitting inside of it. The names that we give these different sections here um, are simply part of the system of mind control and disinformation. This is Madagascar, by the way. Um, so that's my starter for this conversation. Now, um, what if you saw my video from yesterday? I was bringing to your attention, and thankfully, a few of my friends have offered me some comments and a little bit of. They haven't shot me out down in flames with this idea, and this is the idea that this cold region here, all of this icy region here in northern Canada, and I think we would call this Russia, but let's not get into the nuance of this at this point in time. I think what I'm pushing out here is quite a long way from everything that we've typically thought about when it comes to the way that the flat Earth model may work and how it may look in reality. So this is a bit of a stretch, and it requires us to sit around a campfire and chew over this as an absolutely new way of conceiving of the way that this is set out. So please bear with me and don't expect me to be able to answer all of the questions. I don't have all of the answers. I'm looking to the thinkers out there to add their ideas to this concept. I'm not going to lose sleep over the exact nature of the model, but I am of the mind that the typical flat Earth projections that we are given have been fiddled with. So we know for sure that up here is very dry and very cold. They boast about how it's minus 30, minus 40 degrees in the winter, but actually it's quite pleasant because it's so dry. They also get vast amounts of snow, and you can take a ship, a cruise up here. You can take a cruise up in this region here above Scandinavia. I'd say this is Sweden, Norway, and all of that up here. You can take cruises up in this area, and we know that Siberia, and I think we're talking about China here, a little bit of China. I may be slightly off on that, but certainly this is northern Russia, Siberia, isn't it? And all of these are like tundra, frozen tundra, no-go areas. Okay. So for me, it opens the possibility that these areas here are actually already they're already an Antarctic ice wall. These are already embedded. This is all the way at the top of an Earth in which there is potentially an ice wall. I mean, I'm not trying to insist that there has to be a 360-degree ring of ice. I'm not trying to insist on that. But let's just stay with that as a possible situation for now. So that this here is your Antarctic ring, and these fjords represent. I mean, if you take my mother and father, actually before my mom died, she took her last trip was to go and see some of the fjords up here, and I know that you can take boat trips into Scandinavia above here and see these massive walls of ice. So if there's any ice walls that we know of in our world, then they're up here. Okay. Down here, we've got New Zealand, which is in its southern island, has got glacier of a staggering nature as far as I know. I haven't been there, but from the information that I have, this is glacier too. And from what I know, we're talking about glaciers down here too. And we all know that the Falkland Islands, our wonderful masters up here, have insisted on keeping these tiny islands. Why? Why would they do that? Why would they have invested in the Boer War in their biggest ever conflict apparently was to ensure that they maintain control of this piece of land here. And of course we know that our masters also made sure that they were controlling this piece of land too, and without a shadow of a doubt, this piece of land too. So I'm suggesting at this point in time, to keep it simple, that we actually live in this space here, and that, in this space here, and that where I'm tracing could be our Antarctic ring. There are some questions that I can't answer for certain about if this is Hawaii. How do we get to Japan on this side? And I'm not, as I said, I'm not looking to be able to answer every question at this point in time. There are so many concepts that need to be revisited when you consider this, because if you take this as being your Antarctic ring, and here at somewhere down there, and then you can take we know that I'm not sure now how many days of shipping it is, but I think a 5-day trip will get you down to the ice here. From a weather point of view, Cape Town is remarkably colder than Durban. However, it's not nearly as cold as to warrant sort of ice formations at any time. Some cold in the winter and a little bit of snow, perhaps a flurry, but nothing like you experience here, and certainly nothing like these fjords and ice bodies that are down here. Okay. Now if we've allowed that to be our world, it changes a number of things, and most importantly, most importantly, let me see if I can get that back. Sorry about that, friends. You have to look at my ugly mug while I alter the thing. Hello. Good morning. Let me just get that back. The computer just shut down on me while I was yakking. Okay. 1 sec. All right, here we go. All right. Sorry for the delay in service. Now, hopefully, you haven't spat out your cereal and you're still allowing your mind to flow around this possibility that this is Antarctica. Okay? And if that's Antarctica, then the center of our Earth is here. Okay? And if the center of our Earth is here, there is only one, the largest freestanding mountain on Earth. It's called Mount Kilimanjaro, not Mount Meru, but Mount Kilimanjaro. And it may not be a magnetic mountain, but it is a massive, massive black mountain. They say that it's volcanic activity, and there's sort of, it's not all there anymore. So that may or may not be true. I'm not looking to kind of, I'm not looking to force that point. But I am asking you to contemplate that the entire edifice of the story of Mount Meru and the 4 inrushing seas and all the stories of ships going there and magnets. Sorry, the nails being pulled out of wooden ships and all of that sort of thing up here is hocus pocus, like virgin birth. Yeah, and an illiterate Muhammad writing a fantastic book called the Quran. Yeah. So, is it possible that all the Mount Meru business and the four inrushing seas and so on is a part of the grand deception? And that actually, when they say we're out of Africa and so on, that the center of our world is actually here. Um, it does require for us to think differently about um, how this how perhaps the sun is operating. I mean, I know obviously we view the sun in the way that we do, but for example, I've been chewing over this that I would sit on the beach here in Cape Town, and I know I wasn't there for all that long, but I love being there. And in the summertime, I've sat on the beaches here on this west coast and seen the sunset down here. And that doesn't really work with the traditional conception of the flat earth model. And it might be why, back in 2016, I sat with my father in a lounge here and tried. He's a shipping man himself. He used to sail ships in the 60s, mail ships from England to South Africa. That's where he met my mother, in fact, on the ship. But I tried to explain to him the flat Earth model that I'd been handed down by the Flat Earth Society, and I call them the Flat Earth Society, the current leaders of the known Flat Earth, right? So I tried to explain that to him, and he thought about it for a while. He said, "No, Dave, that's rubbish." Now I realize that we don't want to force a model on people, because this is part of why people get so angry. But I have to say that in my mind's eye, I've sat on beaches here, beautiful beaches here, and seen the sunset down here. And that definitely isn't the same kind of perspective you would get from the traditional flat Earth model, which is, let me just pull that up. So, like this, for example. Okay. It just doesn't work because actually the sun is meant to be going sort of at its Capricorn at its lowest point. It's really meant to be doing this, and I wouldn't be able to sit on a beach here and see it setting here. Okay. So there are a number of things wrong with our conception, the model that we've all been droolingly told to kind of go out and push. Now, what else can I add to this conversation for now? Oh yeah, back to the moving water, the moving bodies of water. Now, if this Africa is central to the entire thing, I mean, it doesn't have to be. I think that it's possible that we can also, where you've got water rushing down, coming down this way, this is an absolute fact. As I say, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've experienced the warm water here, and I've experienced the frigid, clean water here. The water's coming down here, perhaps going through some sort of recycle program and coming back up fresh, and then obviously washing up Africa and making its way up here. Interestingly, there's places here that have really mild weather. I think they call them the Isle of Scilly, or no, maybe the Isle of Scilly is up here. There are some islands south of England that have balmy conditions, and I would suggest to you that that's because the water that they're receiving is this warm water that's coming up from here, whilst there's frigid water coming in from the North Sea the ice flows from the Antarctic rim all the way up here. So that the concept that we have a central point all the way up here, that everything's sort of recycling, and that's where the North Pole is and the Mount Meru is let's put it like this. If there was a magnetic mountain here that all compasses were pointing to, then when someone was all the way down here in New Zealand, that magnetic pull on that compass would be so much less than someone who was, say, up here, that it actually would be measurable, that it would be like, wow, that's, things are really, magnets are, things, things with metal in them are being particularly drawn here because they're so much closer to this massive mountain, as they say. Whereas things down here would be notably less so, right? That kind of makes sense. Whereas if our compasses are working off some sort of ley line system that's on this Earth, some electromagnetic ley line system, then it means that wherever you are, you're under an equal amount of magnetic effect. And the way that it points to a particular place, being north, as I suggested in a comment to the Flat Earth British Sub Lee, that it might be the case that these are this outer rim has a sort of the magnetic effect of being inside of a torus. Let me pull up for your torus for your edification. So if we're inside of a torus system, that's a joke. Let me get rid of that one. If we're inside of a torus system, then it doesn't really matter where you are. Those magnetic lines, the magnets are compasses are going to be attracted rather to the lines that are nearest to them, and that those lines could actually be, or that attraction could actually be pulling southward, and they just paint it. Well, I'm getting myself a little bit confused, but they could easily be fiddling with that. So we always accept that what they're doing is, what's happening. Let's have a look here. I'll give you a traditional. This one is by the Flat Earth Society, actually, the flatearthsociety.org. So, that they're willing to say that there is a central point here. Could also be offering us disinformation, of course, because that's what they are, the Flat Earth Society. But we just simply accept that all compasses are being pulled to this strong load here. But in fact, the further away you got from it, the less accurate your compass would become. So for me, it's far more likely that there's we're in kind of some sort of energetic system that our compasses work to. So without wanting to explore that too deeply, because I'm not sitting around the campfire with a blunt in my hand, I will offer to you the possibility that the compasses work. They work on a different model, a different basis. Okay, let's just leave it like that for now. I don't want to extend this conversation for too long at this point, because I'd rather have the debate and discussion around the table with people than just pushing this all out. But that here, just above the equator, I think 4 degrees above the equator, we've got this massive mountain, Mount Kilimanjaro, which is perhaps the Mount Meru. Although I'm not suggesting that it's a magnetic mountain, and I'm not suggesting that all of our compasses are drawing to it. But if the Most High Creator, assuming that's a true story, has the ability to sit upon a mountain and see all of the Earth, then it's more than likely going to be something like this. Truth in plain sight. We have never seen, and no one has ever brought us any images, photos, or anything of any massive mountain or anything like that. Everything is hearsay. Everything is pictures and drawings and so on. So that possibility that there is some massive mountain and some vast tracts of land. Let me see if I can. Let me just go and get the Mount Meru conception up so that we've got it in our minds. What is this? This won't be. American climbers conquer India's Mount Meru, shark's fin. And that's not helpful. It's not even in, India's got its own Mount Meru. I didn't know that. Let's see, Mount Meru and inrushing sea. Let's see if that doesn't help me. Mount Kilimanjaro. It's funny that name. World's largest volcanoes, Africa's highest point, world's highest freestanding mountain. Uhuru Peak, Tanzania. Uhuru, Mount Meru. Not that far different, is it? Uhuru, Mount Meru. World's highest freestanding mountain. And I guess you could say that, on a good day, if you had godlike vision, this would be the best place to come and see the world, the whole world. All right, what I'm going to do is just add to my little, what do we got here? This is some ancient conception. Oh, rosette. Apologies for the slowness of my service here, but I am doing this kind of on the fly. Mount Meru, North Pole. North Pole. Okay, yeah, this is what I was looking for. You see, I'm no longer willing to accept that this is how it all looks. Rosette's a little bit on my shit list at the moment anyway, because she's come out with all this Hitler's a good guy kind of thing, and I've got to say that I think that's some sort of white nationalist thing to get all the Tommy Robinson fanboys messed up. So it makes my stomach turn to think that we're being drawn into a, Hitler was a good guy kind of thing. Misunderstood. But we're meant to believe that all of this land here, this is Greenland, all of this land here is, I hope you can see my pointer. All of this land here is actual land. And when you look at obviously, or if you look at the Globey Boys' little daydream version of the world, this is either a massive amount of ice, or in some conceptions there are lands and so on. They fiddle around with it so much you can't really know for sure. I assume this is going to be Europe, and this is Russia and Asia. It just doesn't, California, this is here. But I don't think that's as it is now. I mean, this has to obviously be the sort of Canada and North America type thing here. But um, none of this seems to me to actually exist in reality. This is the mind trick, and this lodestone, this thing in the middle. We can't actually. Nothing seems to make sense. I mean, people struggle to travel beyond here, and I can't conceive of us ever having traveled from here over a vast amount of land. I mean, because if you were flying across this, let alone trying to walk or take a ship, this is a vast amount of land. I mean, this is as big as Europe. They mess around with the size of Greenland. So all of this is they're always trying to fiddle with this. Um, so I'm suggesting that, well, of course we know that it's not round. Well, we don't know that's not round like this, but I don't think that we travel. You don't see flights, or you can't see flights leaving Sweden here and traveling over to Canada like this. They would kind of go this way to Canada, right? Equally, I was in IKEA the other day, and I noticed that they're boasting about the NASA satellite program work that they do all the way up here. So, to me, this is probably as high as you go before you get into before you get into the Antarctic. This is the ice wall up here. Um, so we travel from here and across to here to go to Canada. We don't go that way for starters. We're scooting sideways. We're always scooting sideways. This map isn't right according to work that other guys have done, including Antonio Subarat's. This whole landmass is actually more accurately described as being sort of out this way. Okay. Um, so again, you've got this ice wall that goes around here. You've got a central point here, and actually, if you look at skin tones, then you probably find that the whitest people come from the rim, and the darkest people come from the sort of central regions. Yeah, this is the center. And as I said, Kilimanjaro may well be that Mount Meru, Mount Uhuru. I mean, really, is that what I'd need to go and pull it back up again. Uhuru. Um, so hey, I mean, that's just I want to keep it short like that. Um, I'm sure that we can. I'd like for you to explore this idea in your mind, give it some time. That all of this is disinfo. All of this is disinfo. We know these lands exist, okay? That's not a problem. But we don't think that we can travel like that. We can come across these places, but this lot in the middle, no. Same as the bit at the bottom, the Antarctic thing. We got no issue with the idea. I think the same is true here, that it's actually more likely like that. How do I answer the question about Russia and so? I mean, they could have created a little piece of Russia here and say, right, well, we'll make this next to Canada, a little bit of Russia, and we'll allow people to travel to there. But when they take flights to get to Moscow or whatever, that's probably like a whole different ball of wax, the way that they fly. And of course, using the Great Circle Route, you can bamboozle the pilots into thinking they're flying wherever you want them to fly. So yeah, I hope that's a useful concept. Remember that the way that the magnet works inside of a torus field, or the way that a compass, I should say, works inside of a torus field, is going to be completely different from this idea that there is one lodestone pulling all compasses to this alleged Mount Meru. Let me pull up Kilimanjaro one more time. There's a song by a South African guy, a Jewish South African guy called Johnny Clegg. I met Johnny Clegg a few times. Actually, he used to train in a gym that I worked at in South Africa, and I helped him do, I helped him with the bench press. Hey. Uh, um, yeah, I'm sitting on the top of Kilimanjaro, and I can see a new tomorrow. We are actually connected, so let's see if I can recycle. I'm sitting on the top of Kilimanjaro. I can see a new tomorrow. And actually, it's one of those things that makes you think, oh, I should mention that this guy, Johnny Clegg, that's obviously not his real name, as I say, he's a Jewish chap. He got given an award by the Queen a few years ago. That's the Queen of Phoenicia, England, and Britain, and all the territories of near the ice wall. Um, and I was like, what? Why is he getting? Why would Johnny Clegg be given an award by the Queen? I mean, what did he do that the Queen would be interested in his stuff? Well, perhaps he was putting out some music that was truth in plain sight. And that the Kilimanjaro, or Uhuru, Mount Meru, the world's highest freestanding mountain, yeah, is the center of our flat plane. How about that as a concept? I mean, this obviously requires for us to be thinking. Thanks for that. Yeah, it is a lot to think about, Peredi, if you're still there. And thanks for stopping by. Cool, chilly girl. It's a lot to ponder, and it obviously is a very different conception of the world that is based on this. But I think that this is part of the lie. I think that this is part of this is how they started to create a globe. See, because this works on a globe. It does, but when you see the world like that, then you're like, okay, so how does you'd have to wrap it around something at a central point. And of course, the way that magnets, I mean, compasses are a curiosity, aren't they? Because they always have this declination. I forget now from my compass training, but really, there's north, there's true north, and then there's magnetic north. And there's all this fiddling, and I think it depends on where you are and at what time, because magnetic north changes, and and so there's all these sort of things that don't really make sense. That if you had a magnetic point at one point, then the further away you went from the magnet, the weaker it would become. But it would be, arguably, it would always be a constant, central point. So the compass thing about pointing to Mount Meru, I'm calling bullshit on that right now. Okay. And the idea that, see, we're up here in Scandinavia, in Sweden, we're at they've got a little thing called Lapland up here, and it's they make a big joke in Sweden about living up in the Laps, and that's only 63, 64, maybe 65 degrees north. Okay. Now, people are living in their regular homes at 65 degrees north, 60, there or thereabouts. But 65 degrees is still 25 full degrees to your Mount Meru, and then another 25 degrees on to get to the equivalent place on the other side of said round projection, right? Let's bring that back up again. So here we are. Okay, what does the red line say? I don't know, but from memory, I think it says there lapse. So we're talking about 65 degrees here. So that's another 25 degrees there, and then another 25 degrees here. So that's 50 degrees of the Earth, which is a vast distance, actually. And I just don't see that. I don't. I don't see that we have that amount of land up here. Yes, they might be able to kind of bamboozle you by traveling sideways rather than straight north, because we never. I don't think we ever really do that. So these are points to ponder and things that don't really work with the current conception of a flat Earth. Um, I'm not insisting on Kilimanjaro as being the central point. It is arguably 4 degrees north of the equator. So, although the equator is obviously an imagined line, but we assume it to be the you know to be a fixed line that the sun at the middle of the year is going over this point. But I mean, these things are all fairly easy to I think to fiddle with when you're only talking about conceptions of where lines should be and where things are. And of course, we know, as again to summarize, that it's super cold down here. It's super cold down here, and these regions here are all super warm. So this is where the main action is when it comes to the sun, where the sun's at, and out here is where it's coldest. All right. I hope that's helpful. I'm probably going to leave it there and say have a good day, and I'll catch up with you later. Not a lot of comments, but yeah, Peretti, open mindfulness. And think about it. Who gave us the flat earth model as we know it? Who gave us the Bible as we know it? These things are so powerful. These are powerful, powerful tools, and we know that we've been deceived on so many levels that it's absolutely imperative that we're willing to, that we're not, if you think about the military aspect of the Flat Earth rollout by the Flat Earth Society, the Mark Sargents and all of them, they've been more than happy just to keep pushing one model. And as I say, just because we got a map that says 1500s, there's Globers, bald boys who'll say they've got a ball Earth from the 1500s. So, we know that that's a psyop, that's disinfo. So why not to the maps of the flat Earth as we have it? And as I said, my personal experience is in Southern Africa is that there is a moving body of water that is heading towards the Antarctic southern region, and there is a moving body of water that is coming up from that. And actually, as I mentioned that, I'm remembering something else that's worth saying to you, and that is that up here we know that there are fjords and ice walls and so on, but just in this region here, we're able to kind of live there fairly well. Down here, we got what's called the Roaring Forties, and down here in the 50s and 60s, it's almost impossible. I mean, not impossible, but it's very difficult to live. So and all of this is military shutdown. And as if you didn't hear me at the beginning say that, it took 5 years for the organizers of the Ranulph Fiennes tour to get permission slips to go on their little across, a few thousand miles across this ice shelf. Just as an aside, actually, interestingly, I wrote an email to the wife of the main coordinator of all the logistics, right? Because I'd taken their emails when I was doing the little bit of journalism. I'd taken their email address and communicated with them, and afterwards, after it had failed, I wrote her an email and said, "No, I'm sorry it didn't work out. No, And the reply I got back from her was kind of terse, and it seemed surprising at the time. But now I realize that there might well have been other, there might have been other, um, they might have learned something that they might have had problems with the military. They might have had other problems other than what we're told. We're told that this, veteran explorer got frostbite in a toe or something, or had a fall and it scuppered the entire thing. Thousands, many thousands of pounds, and all these years of so on, and they have to, the Britain's greatest modern day explorer has to call off his thing just days into the actual mission. So there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered about that, and a lot of suspicious aspects to that. So I submit this to you for consideration. It is a mind blower, but remember, the best way to lead the opposition, no, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it. And partly why people may struggle to find a flat Earth is because the model doesn't quite make sense. As I said, I've seen sunsets from Cape Town that don't quite fit the current flat Earth model that we're all given. And also that, wouldn't it be great that if all we ever did was, realize that we've been lied to about the globe, and then go and perpetuate yet another lie? My friends, we're here because we're people who question our reality as we've been given it, and I'm offering you some tangible things that leave the potential truth in plain sight. So that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope you have a super day. Please offer me some useful comments. I look forward to having a deeper discussion and unpicking this more. And people who know South America better and Canada better and so on, they might be able to add something more to this conversation. Hey, Vicky. That's my boy, my bigger boy. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Down in New Zealand, you have to get permission if you want to go to Antarctica. Well, yeah, I mean, we know that. We know that. Thank you. We and again, it'll be like you can go down and touch a point. That's all you get. You can spend maybe 50 miles, 100 miles, even 500 miles. But it's all off limits, and it's all very controlled, and it's all very restricted. But it is interesting because you can get there from those places: New Zealand, South America, Falklands, Cape Town. And equally, you can get to tundra, frozen tundra, very strange, cold, frigid conditions up in northern Canada, Saskatchewan as they call it, and the Yucatan, I think, is it, and then in the Russian, the Siberia, northern Siberia, and they turned that into no-go areas, and only for prisoners, and the Chinese have closed there. The China's so shut down for a reason. So I think the truth is much closer to home. I think this place is probably a lot smaller. You've got to think a lot smaller. It also means the Captain Cook story is partly disinformation. So there you go, my friends. I'm going to leave it there. You're welcome, Freddie. Thank you very much for your contribution and for sticking with me this whole hour.